Okay, so our non-surface claim seems a little baroque or grandiose, right? That the fundamental basis of radio's cultural and historical significance was a unique combination of aesthetic form and what it calls corporeal actuality. But it's really a very simple point. While radio is a triumph of transmission, it mattered most as a cultural form. As it was for an old sound medium, so it is for a new sound format. The MP3 matters because of the feats of transmission in which it's been involved, to be sure. But the MP3 also matters because it's a historically unique blend of aesthetic form and corporeal actuality. There's that phrase again. Every MP3 conforms to a basic code, a code which carries within it practical understandings of what it means to communicate, what it means to listen, how the mind's ear works, and what it means to make music. Now, what are some of these connections between bodies and media? To return for a moment to the idea of the mediality of sound, the MP3 format privileges distraction. Now, if you think about this in the interdisciplinary writing on music, what is now often referred to as music studies in the United States and Canada and Britain, most theories of listening subjectivity privilege some kind of attention. Think about this, right? The ideal subject of the musicologist is somebody sitting in a concert hall, listening attentively, passionately to the music. The ideal subject of the ethnomusicologist is the participant in some kind of collective musical activity. The ideal subject of the media historian is the family crowded around the radio set, listening passionately and attentively to the radio program. And the ideal subject of the new media scholar is, someone avidly participating and constructing their identity through, for instance, online fan cultures. But distraction is an equally important dimension of sound media history and contemporary experience. So, for instance, radio historians like David Goodman and Alex Russo have shown that from the very beginning, radio engineers and audiences were as often distracted from the programs as they were attending to them. And the same can be found in scholarship on portable audio, like Shri Hosokawa's study of the Walkman and Michael Bull's study of the iPod. So MP3s, in a way, write that history into the very code of music. Now, for those of you who are particularly persnickety, I'm going to anticipate an objection to what I've been arguing so far, which is there's an English phrase, comparing apples with oranges. You're comparing two different things, and you might say I'm sort of comparing apples with fruit because MP3 is a format and radio or sound recording is a medium. What difference does the format or the formatness of the format make? And so we shall turn to the MP3 as a format in particular. To use a term from Matthew Fuller, the MP3 is a standard object. Though we think of it, the MP3 as a file, MP3 also points to a set of rules governing the process of coding and decoding audio. It also names a vast set of processes that conform to these rules. Now, Fuller's two examples of standard objects are freight containers and packet switching, which is the technology by which the internet works. Both of these are built without particular things in mind. So, for instance, a standard-sized glove is made specifically for a hand, right, in a hand of a certain size. But any material thing smaller than the interior space of a shipping container, there's your shipping container, anything smaller than the size of a shipping container will sit inside it. So systems built on standards have to be closed enough to operate independently according to the standard set for them. But they also take on certain self-generating, adjusting, or perpetuating characteristics. To understand standard object is to understand how it binds together, and this is a quote from Fuller, different perspectival scales, technologies, epistemologies, rhythms, and affordances. This is clear when we consider the many possible political uses and valences of something like a shipping container, right? They aid in the sort of global circulation of goods, both licit and illicit, and occasionally people. They've been used to break powerful labor unions on the docks, They've been used as a residence for squatters and later as the raw material for avant-garde architects. And so they're also used quite recently in Canada, in fact, as temporary stockade walls to protect summits and embassies from protesters and car bombs, and on and on. Now, MP3s have a similarly confusing politics. At one moment, they seem to challenge existing property relations around music, while at another, they seem to uphold them. At one moment, they seem to be creatures of a high technology fetish, while at others, they appear to refuse technologically driven high aesthetics. They are artifacts of intense regulation and control, industrial jockeying and negotiation, and at the same time, MP3s are agents of chaos. The MP3 operates at the intersection of many different political currents in contemporary sound culture. As formats, MP3s are governed by international standards, and they do imply particular corporate structures and ways of doing things. But most people don't say, I'm going to listen to MP3s now. They listen to music, or radio, or podcasts, or ringtones. MP3s exist below the level of such practices. So they reveal the connections among diverse sonic forms and media. No matter how specific we get with a given medium, it will always open out into other media, and one of these openings is via formats. Formats don't set us free of constraints. They offer us a different route through the study of mediality. And not all formats are of equal historical or conceptual significance. Many may be dead ends. So for instance, I'm not saying, you know, we have television studies, we have radio studies, we have film studies, we have histories of sound recording, and on and on. I'm not saying that there should be MP3 studies and real audio studies and NTSC studies and PAL studies, because that would be boring and pointless. What I'm saying is that if a format has enough depth, breadth, and reach, it may offer completely different inroads to a media history, and it may well show us subterranean connections among media that we previously thought separate. So the study of formats does not mean forgetting what we learned from the study of media, or more broadly, communication technologies. It is simply to take those media and technologies a little less seriously as things in themselves, and instead consider the embedded ideas and routines that cut across them. So as I argue throughout the book, a deep history of the MP3 format requires us to reconsider the relationship of hearing and technology in the 20th century. Now, writers have often collapsed discussions of format into our analysis of what is important about a given medium. So consider the example of television. Bundled with it are a whole set of assumptions about the formatting of sound and image. But most importantly, these assumptions change over time. Most obvious at the present moment would be the switch to the digital spectrum and high-definition broadcast. Since the 1940s, North American analog television has been filmed and broadcast with a 4:3 horizontal-vertical aspect ratio. So, here's an example. There we go. Here's an example of an image with a 4:3 horizontal to vertical aspect ratio. In other words, the line across the top is 4 units long versus the line down, which is 3 units long. Now this ratio was set for television in 1941. It was first suggested in 1936, and it was chosen for TV because this was the ratio for Hollywood films. And in fact, at the time, and this is the last frame from the Maltese Falcon, for those of you who are film buffs. Films had a 4:3 aspect ratio, and they said, well, TV should look like movies. And thus, to this day, North American analog TVs, and I noticed the analog TV in my hotel room also, had a 4:3 aspect ratio, and audio-visual content from other media, such as film or other formats, such as high-definition TV, has to be reformatted to fit an analog TV screen when we watch it. Now, in either case, people interested in the aesthetic experience of TV viewing will comment on the size and shape of the TV image. And even casual users are made more aware of the different formatting possibilities in TV when they switch between high-definition content and reruns. Even more important are things like actual screen size, sound quality, and color. Now, of course, the part of the story I left out is that as soon as TV chose a 4:3 aspect ratio, Hollywood said, wait a minute, we don't want TV to look like us, we want TV to look different, we want to look better than TV. So, they chose different aspect ratio, 1.85 to 1, which is what this image is. And that's a picture of something blowing up in one of the more recent Batman movies. I don't remember which one. But you'll see the image is much wider and much, not as tall. So, all the dimensions of format are codified in some ways, sometimes through policy, sometimes through construction of the technology, and sometimes through sedimented habit, right? So in the screen example, you build a TV with a certain size screen, you've just codified the format. If people want to watch stuff in a different format, there's either going to be black spots on the TV, they'll miss part of the picture, or they'll need a different TV. Propositions such as Larry Lessig's famous adage that code is law, or technologies that have scripts for user actions written into them, as is a common assertion in science and technology studies, help us to understand the contractional and conventional, if not exactly consensual, nature of media formats. The format is what specifies the protocols by which a medium will operate.